Hi class, this is the second PowerPoint audio for the Cell 5 text for sales. I'm going to try to make this one go pretty quickly. We're talking initially here about prospecting and the significance of prospecting and how to prepare for developing a list, and then the conversations that you have with your customers. I've never really liked prospecting. But again, it's one of those things in sales that you simply have to kind of prep yourself for. And there is a process that one can go through to build their list of prospects and evaluate the likelihood of any one prospect ultimately doing a deal with you. And I'll tell you a quick story, and hopefully it has some relevance to some of these topics that we're going to cover. When I first got to Lanai, I was told that they'd gone through this process of developing a list. The company had hired a consulting firm from Los Angeles to go because they were having so much problem with their sales. They hadn't sold anything in 18 months while the rest of Hawaii was sort of going crazy. And so the consultant had helped them develop a screening system where they divided their customers into hot, warm, and cold. And from the time they started this until my wife and I showed up, they had a list of something. I think it was almost 3,000 names by then, but it was in excess of 1,500 for sure. But I think it was like 3,000, and they had divided that list, and they had something on the order of 800 hots, and they would give the office in LA would call weekly to find out how sales were going. Normally it was the finance officer that called, and they wanted to know how many prospects they had, and that was their term, just like in the text, is this a prospect? And they defined a prospect as somebody who had all the qualifications and characteristics of somebody who was likely to buy. And I told them when I got there and learned this that I thought it was very odd that they'd have so many hot prospects, yet they hadn't sold anything in 18 months. And that I would take a look at the list. And over the next, I think, month or so, I kind of dumped the entire list and really focused as we developed customers, new customers through conversations that were visiting the island. At any one time, I would have what I called 3 or 4 actual prospects. And this really bothered them, the finance people. I mean, he told me on more than one occasion when he called, and I just eventually started to ignore the phone calls and turned it over to an administrative assistant to deal with them. But they had exactly 26 properties that were, I think it was 26 properties, something like that, that was worth about 25 million in sales total on the books that they wanted to get rid of. And I pointed out that if one or so of these people that I was correct about at any point in time bought a property, they'd be out of it in 6 months. And that's about the speed that it actually turned out to be. I think it was 6 to 9 months that everything was sold. So the point of that story is that a hot prospect, you have to be able truly to identify them. So it's really important. It goes back to my 3 questions of who's my customer, to truly know your customer, but at the same time knowing your product and being able to spot somebody who would be interested in that. And so one of the things I did uh, when I first got there is ask them. They had about 100 owners at that point. Again, this is the island of Lanai, small island. And I asked them where their owners were from, and the broker said, "Well, I've got the list of owners. You can look at their zip codes." And I said, "Well, where are they from?" "Well, we've got some from here and there." And the point is, they had uh, never divided them up to see if there was a match between where these people lived and if there was a preference of locations where buyers were from for particular kinds of products. And long story short, they had two products. They had an upcountry and a beach communities. And about 30%, 35% of the owners were from Hawaii. About 30% of them were from California, and it was specifically the Bay Area. They had another 30% from the Northwest, and then the rest of them were kind of scattered around the country. And so you had these three areas where most of the people were from. And the upcountry property was a little cheaper than obviously than some of the units down on the beach. And of the properties, it was about 50-50 of locations. In other words, 50% were from the upcountry and 50% of the properties were down at the beach. And all but one of the 30 owners from Hawaii lived in the upcountry. Nobody had really put a pencil to it and seen that. And they were all very surprised that there was that big of an in-state market for that particular product. The majority of those owners were from Oahu, but a few of them were from, two were from Maui and then a couple from the Big Island. But in conversations with the people from Hawaii, I mean, I'd lived there before, and it didn't surprise me. Hawaii is a long way from the mainland. Well over half the state has never been out of state. Most of the people with that kind of money have, but it's a long way to visit a second home from Hawaii, and why do you want to leave it anyway? So it made sense to me that people would buy these upcountry, and it's really rural when you get to Lanai. It's only 35 miles of paved roads, I think, on the entire island. And so less than that, actually. I think there's 35 miles of roads probably. But anyway, people from Oahu could get there very quickly on a Dash 10, 25 minutes flight. And you're in another world when you get to leave Oahu and you get to Hawaii. So the other 35% from the Bay Area and 30% from Seattle, a lot of them were tech or peripheral to tech, and they were quasi-retirees. A lot of them have been military people or professionals that had started their own companies, and they were probably most of them were north of 50, and they were very humble. They didn't like fast-paced life, and they liked a place where they could visit and be known by the people when they showed up. And so it was easy to develop a persona so that when you were meeting somebody from one of those three locations and you learned a little bit about what they did, you could tell pretty quickly whether or not they were, quote, a fit, unquote, with that particular product. It also told us, what to build for those particular, what they liked about the product and what to build for those markets, and also where to advertise and sort of the messages. And so that's the connection between marketing and sales, and knowing your product and knowing how your customer views and interacts with your product. And I think that when I read these chapters, that's what sort of resonated with me was uh, the process that you go through to develop your list, but while at the same time understanding the interaction, the connection, the link, if any, between that mailing list and what I would call the hot potential prospects on it and your product, because that's what really kicks off who you're going to give attention to. So we gathered most of our referrals from, well, we met them in a number of ways. I mean, they'd come in, we'd hold functions at the hotels to pull people in. And after that, we would do um, follow-up connections. We had some very good website material that, again, was targeted in their messaging to um, these particular people. So, long story short, there were a number of ways we would try to uh, promote the hotels within those areas after they sort of saw the connection. They started advertising in those areas where they knew um, the prospects were coming from. And there's obviously other kinds of sales program where you have to be more proactive in developing uh, sets of prospects. But in all cases, what you need, obviously, at the end of the day, is a plan. You should set goals. You should and objectives. You should quantify them. We want to make X number of contacts monthly or weekly. You need to know what kind of records to keep. Allocate your time accordingly. You know who you're going to spend your money on when it comes to the budgets. And it sounds a little clinical, and actually it is. Uh, good salespeople get good at determining who's a fit and who is not. So you want to keep all relevant information, contact information, uh, who who are the buyers, what's their role, are they the gatekeeper, are they decision maker, are they the user, whatever, and then keep track of your follow-up. And there's some really good software out there now. I never used it, but like CRM, Salesforce.com are very good at helping salespeople organize their activities in a way that assures that you're going to be able to track all of these people without losing touch. So again, to prepare for a sale, you want to have the basic information about the prospect. You want to know uh, who they are, what they do, and how they interact with the the product or services that you're selling. You want to know about the sources of information that you've gathered about them. You want to know about the buyer. You want to know information about their business. You want to know uh, the type of purchase that they're making, their motivation, their current supplier. In my case, what are the other choices out there? Uh, why are they interested in your particular product or service or your particular company? If in fact they have that kind of that level or narrow focus. What's your budget, I mentioned, and who are the competitors involved? There's a lot of different Again, sources of information anymore. I was in Hawaii last in 2005 or 6, and the internet was just really coming on, and its ability, or utility rather, as a tool for gathering information was really just beginning to morph. But you can find out a lot about people anymore rather quickly. All these are relevant dimensions to consider when you're getting information or assessing your prospective clients. After that, you want to prepare or be able to determine what you're going to talk about after you've identified these clients. You know, in the going back to my case in Hawaii, and it sounds like it's not related, I suppose, in some cases uh, to the sales that the text is talking about. But the more I think about it and the more I read, I think it is. The process is the same. It's just the product is different. There is some differences in how you go about putting together your list of prospects and such. But there's a process, and you have to, in all cases, figure out the process that is going to best match the situation that you're in and what you're trying to accomplish. So in my case, it was figuring out what I thought based on the information, cursory information that I'd get about a client and their stated level of interest, is lining that up with the particular products that I thought that would most resonate with them. And we'd usually have meetings or take them out to dinner, and I'd be ready to talk about um, how I thought our product was a fit compared to other competing products in other islands, and and in some cases, why I thought it would be a fit with them socially, given if their profiles were a match with the existing owners and that sort of thing. Now, there's different kind of sales. I didn't really have what I'd call a can presentation, although there were things that you always had to talk about as far as the attributes of the island, what were its unique characteristics relative to other places within the state, what they could do. Written sales proposals, that would have relevance. For me, it was a sales contract potentially, but I never took one of those to dinner. Um, and in other sales efforts, it would be a proposal that you'd put in front of the company and its decision makers with the details of a potential transaction. And you can have organized sales dialogues and presentations, whether that's at conferences or seminars or just for that particular group or groups. You could have a kind of a canned speech that's similar to a canned speech that you take in a presentation kind of form or format. So, as far as a written proposal is concerned, you might have an executive summary, customer needs, and proposed solution. uh, information about the seller itself, the seller profile, and why again it's a fit with the business that you're doing business with. Pricing and sales agreements, and your implementation and timetable schedule. And as far as that relating to us, we did a lot of custom construction or alterations to properties that we sold. And so that was very applicable actually to have a implementation and financing timetable. That involved both parties. Um, as far as creating effective sales proposals, whether it's a presentation or in writing, you can read these through. I'm not going to read them for you, but basically make sure that it's well organized, that it's articulate, and that it's comprehensive as far as covering all the related elements that both sides are interested in. Again, same slide as before. These are the dimensions for evaluating sales proposals: their reliability, assurance, tangibles, empathy, responses. And then finally, when you want to engage the customer, request an appointment, give the prospect a reason why an appointment should be granted, request a specific amount of time, suggest a specific time for the appointment. I want to go back and say request a specific amount of time. Be really careful that you're asking for the amount of time that you need. If you need an hour, ask for an hour. Don't ask for 15 minutes and then uh, it ends up not being able, you can't have the conversation that you want to have or might have to have within that. It's better to finish early than to go over. So be really specific about the amount of time that you think you need. It's a CYA issue.